also look at what we have learned, what we need to do to halt reverse deforestation by 2030. And maybe just a quick question. Who was at Warsaw in 2013 with us from the audience? So quite a bit of memory still here. And I think it's good to do a small refresher for the rest of us as well. We will have a bit of a challenge with the strict time management because all of the equipment will be switched off after 90 minutes in the room. But we'll try to manage. Next slide, please. Click through to the end. Just a small reminder what the Warsaw Framework is. It was a major breakthrough. It's rare that we have 7 decisions on one topic in one COP. It creates a complex but very flexible framework for countries to engage. I can only recommend for everyone to read the actual decisions because there's a lot of misunderstanding of what the decisions say out there. And it was later included in the Paris Agreement at treaty level in Article 5.2. Next slide, please. Just to recall some of the principles, it's really a holistic framework. Many people reduce it to reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, but in fact it also includes enhancing carbon stocks, like in afforestation or in restoration. It also includes conservation of forest carbon stocks and the sustainable management of forests, which is very important. It includes the implementation in phases, so each country can start where it is right now. So we don't have to wait until countries are perfect. We can start from where we are at and improve over time. And it has social environmental standards and safeguards and very clear rules on the forest monitoring system and REDD+ strategy, and especially of transparency of these elements. Next slide, please. On results-based payments, we need all of these things in place for a country to be able to access results-based payments. We need a country to have a national strategy or action plan. We need to have a report on safeguards. We have a reference level that is assessed by experts organized by the UNFCCC. We need to have a forest monitoring system which is explained and results which are also assessed. And only then a country will go on the Lima Info Hub. Next slide, please. And the Lima Info Hub is really our main transparency tool of action and results. And I think it's of major importance to collect everything that's going on and keep everyone on track of what is happening at the national level. It also has started to list first payments from someone. It shows here the payment by the Green Climate Fund, which could be misleading. There are payments by other entities as well, Germany, Norway, UK, CAFI, the Red Early Movers, and others. Next slide, please. Where are we now? A bit on the status of what we have received at the secretariat and what is moving on. This is a graph of the reference level submissions that were received in the last 10 years. It's covering about 1.35 billion hectares of forests, or about 62% of forests in the developing countries. So it's a really strong contribution to global efforts on keeping forests standing and healthy. Next slide. We have the same graph for results. So far there were 31 submissions made by 21 parties. So some advanced parties have made already several submissions on their results. And I will not go into detailed analysis of this. This would require another event. So I go to the next slide, just stating shortly what this means. Yeah, we are then in total registered in the Info Hub with a reduction of 11.6 gigatons CO2 equivalent. And I would say that the graph shows a little bit of bias because there's more reporting on earlier years at the moment, because it takes time to generate the data. So the flattening, I hope, will show differently in future graphs. Next slide, please. I'm just showing the Paris Agreement, Article 5, just to highlight that and to have that in the presentation. I will not read it out, but it's a significant step to include the Warsaw Framework for REDD+, incorporated into the Paris Agreement as one of the core elements. And from there, it moves it from a mere framework of decisions to an integrated and permanent element of a treaty. Next slide, please. And we have some, if we look into implications of that, we would say it sends a very strong political signal on the importance of ecosystems, and in particular forests, for reaching the Paris climate goals. It reassures all parties and stakeholders that the REDD+ framework, as agreed, remains still valid. But, and that's also important, it maintains continuity. Countries can continue to do what they did before. It doesn't disrupt the interaction, doesn't disrupt the operations and ongoing activities. It doesn't create new requirements other than the stepwise approach which already exists to move on and improve from where countries are starting. Next slide, please. Is this very complicated? Well, this shows Decision 1 CP24, which was later included in 18 CMA1 decision by the Paris Agreement body. And it's noteworthy that 4 of the elements remain completely unchanged. The reference levels are unchanged in the technical assessment, the forest monitoring systems, the safeguards reporting is unchanged, and the REDD+ national strategies. All is untouched, goes into the REDD+ web platform as before. There are also no new provisions for how to do the REDD+ results. Only the vehicle to report them changes from being a technical annex to the biennial update reports to being the technical annex to the biennial transparency report. So it's really keeping operations continuous and putting minimum burden on the countries. But it ties REDD+ very closely to the implementation of the Paris Agreement and directly improving or driving improvements in the measurement and reporting also for the forest sector in the Paris Agreement. And if I may say one thing, I think many of the initial biennial update reports we only received mainly because there was an incentive to get the REDD+ results submitted. So we hope there will be a similar effect for the biennial transparency reports and that forest countries will prioritize reporting these on time by the end of next year. Last slide, please. So just to cap why using the Article 5 framework is, oh, that shouldn't be there. Go to the next. Yeah. Just the key messages, I shortened a little bit. Transparency is the foundation of the Paris Agreement. Without transparency of action support, it will be very, very difficult. Forest and REDD+ play a key role, and we need robust institutional arrangements, including a national forest monitoring system, and they are fundamental to achieving multiple national goals. Once these are in place, of course they help for climate change goals, but they also help for the goals of other conventions, for sustainable development goals, for the UN forest goals, and other areas. Once the data is there, it can be used and useful for the countries. And forest finance remains needed and impactful. Readiness finance for some countries, results-based finance for others, and it's especially important to keep what we have built over 10 years up and running. With that, I want to close and want to give the floor to others and just explain a little bit what we've done in the last year. If you remember, there was a lot of bad press on REDD+ early in the year. What we think is often lost in these articles is the difference between small projects and large-scale implementation at jurisdictional level, be it subnational or national. We have created a space for countries to communicate their stories on the REDD web platform, and I'm very happy that 5 of these countries are able to join us here today. They have negotiated REDD+ here at UNFCCC 10 years ago. They have implemented it in their countries, and the framework is theirs to own and use. We would now like to hear just some key messages they would like to share with the world on milestones of the implementation of REDD+, challenges encountered, and important synergies achieved with other goals. Time is always an issue in these events, so I would like to ask you panelists to keep your interventions to 4 to 5 minutes maximum, and give the floor first to Milagros Sandoval, General Director of Climate Change and Desertification at the Ministry of Environment of Peru, where 9 years ago, the Lima Info Hub was launched at the COP in 2014. Milagros, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Dirk, and actually I'm very happy to see very familiar faces around. I was going to say old faces, but I think that in English doesn't sound well. But as you mentioned, Dirk, and I think we have a very long history together with many of the people that are sitting down in this room. Actually, those 10 years, I think, have passed by very quickly. And I think there are a lot of things to identify and start discussing related to what we've done with this framework that we approved 10 years ago. And definitely for Peru, it has been a long way. Actually, I was also supporting my government through civil society when I supported the negotiations on REDD+. And after so many years now, I'm the General Director of Climate Change. And now all of the REDD+ issues are on my plate right now. So definitely it has been a long way. And the good thing is that we know about the history. And many of the people that are sitting down here have or are currently supporting the work of Peru. And we are very grateful for that. Starting with you, Dirk. Thank you. Thank you very much, because I know you've been through this process as well. So in general, I would just like to highlight 3 or 4 issues. One is related to how, after having this big framework, this general framework, how do you implement it in a specific country? From my case, in Peru, we have different milestones and things to address, especially in an HFLD country. Is a REDD+ framework sufficient for an HFLD country? Do we have to go through all the activities, or are we supposed just to address one of these activities? The second one is related to information. Many of developing countries don't have the information necessary and have been working on that information, so definitely that is definitely important. And I think we have now submitted a second reference level, which was submitted 2 years ago, and we have made important changes in methodologies, and we're having much more information, so that's important. And we now have deforestation maps. We're actually working to conclude deforestation maps of 2022 so that they can be useful for all countries that are, or all citizens in Peru or internationally that are needed. And third, I would like to highlight the work that's been done by civil society, but especially by indigenous peoples. Indigenous peoples in Peru have understood that REDD+ was an important message and an important idea, and they have even worked their own REDD+ indigenous initiative, which they are currently now designing and hopefully implementing very, very near. So definitely for us, engaging stakeholders, working on this process, disseminating information, but there still needs to be more dissemination, is definitely important. But indigenous peoples have been a very important stakeholder and are very much aligned to the work that we're doing, and we are working and co-creating together this process. And last but not least, obviously there are projects. Many of you know that we're working on a nesting process right now. But the good thing is that we are learning by doing. We have learned by specific projects that worked on the ground. You mentioned all of this criticism that has gone around. Obviously, Peru was part of this process, but we knew that we had to learn and we had to establish a procedure giving specifically legal security to this process. And we are working right now on a registry and a nesting process. So we are learning, but what has been done at the local level, through engagement, through technical assistance, working and generating more information, but definitely that's part of the process. And I think that although we have not received yet a results-based payment, we are on our way. And also, we are working to establish specific policies related to this process. So definitely, that is very important for us, and thank you very much. Dirk.
Thank you, Milagros, for highlighting the importance of stakeholders and the challenges we have with incorporating everything into one framework. Next, I would like to give the floor to Gabon, Mr. Davi Onomori Mbumba, Special Advisor to the President of the Gabonese Republic. You have the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I will speak in French in order to be understood. Thank you. Alors, merci de nous inviter ici cet après-midi pour cet événement, ce side event à l'occasion donc des 10 ans de la REDD+. Nous allons partager avec vous la petite expérience du Gabon dans cette matière. On va en parler en abordant les principales étapes liées à la mise en œuvre et les quelques difficultés que nous avons rencontrées, notamment dans le cadre de cette mise en œuvre de la REDD+, ainsi que les quelques synergies développées. Alors, peut-être pour commencer, il n'est pas inutile de rappeler que le Gabon est un pays avec un grand couvert forestier, un pays avec une indépendant depuis 1960 et depuis l'immédiate après indépendance avec une tradition quand même d'engagement sur les questions de préservation des forêts, sur les questions d'environnement. Aussi bien sur le plan institutionnel que normatif, dans l'immédiate après indépendance et jusqu'aux années actuelles, il y a toujours eu donc cet engagement-là marqué par la présence d'un ministère chargé des questions d'environnement, des eaux, des forêts dans les tout premiers gouvernements, marqué par l'adoption de textes de loi sur les questions de préservation des forêts et plus généralement sur les questions d'environnement, marqué par une participation aux grands événements, aux grandes conférences environnementales, Rio notamment, Stockholm, ainsi de suite. Donc cet engagement du Gabon dans le cadre de la REDD+, ne date pas d'aujourd'hui. Il y a eu le développement, au-delà des détails que je viens de donner, le développement d'une politique forestière, l'adoption de textes de loi sur la préservation des forêts, code forestier notamment, un plan national d'action environnementale pour arriver plus près de nous dans les années 2000. Tout ça, c'est pour regarder dans le rétroviseur notamment. Le pays est donc engagé dans le cadre d'une planification stratégique, qui vise à conduire le pays vers l'émergence à travers 3 piliers, donc le Gabon industriel, le Gabon vert, et c'est dans ce pilier Gabon vert que nous retrouvons la gestion durable des forêts, la production du bois certifié, le développement de l'agriculture, l'élevage, la pêche durable notamment, et 3e pilier, le Gabon des services. Dans le cadre de cette planification stratégique et insérée ou accolée au plan stratégique Gabon émergent, nous avons un plan national climat, un plan national d'occupation des sols et un programme de connaissance et préservation des ressources naturelles qui vise à s'appuyer notamment sur un système national d'observation des ressources naturelles et forestières. Alors, le plan national climat intègre un certain nombre de considérations, notamment les considérations relatives au changement climatique dans les stratégies sectorielles de développement. Et c'est justement grâce à cette vision stratégique que le pays a participé aux négociations donc, de la CNUC. En dehors donc, du plan stratégique Gabon émergent, qui intègre cette dimension préservation de l'environnement et lutte contre les effets négatifs du changement climatique, nous avons un certain nombre de dispositions législatives, comme je l'ai dit plus haut, et un certain nombre de politiques publiques qui ont été élaborées pour améliorer la gouvernance des forêts, pour améliorer la gestion du territoire, la gestion des terres notamment, et qui ont visé donc et contribué à réduire les émissions de carbone du secteur forestier gabonais. On peut rappeler par exemple que les forêts du Gabon sont réglementées depuis 2001 par un texte qui a introduit l'obligation de mettre en œuvre des plans de gestion durable et des concessions forestières, et depuis 2005 par exemple. On a une loi sur les parcs nationaux, un code de l'environnement, une loi sur le développement durable et depuis 2022, une loi sur les changements climatiques. Parlant des aspects de la mise en œuvre de la REDD+, qui n'ont pas toujours été faciles dans notre pays, c'est lié au contexte international. L'année 2020, qui a vu notre engagement dans cette matière, a été marquée par la Covid-19, son impact sur tous les aspects de nos activités personnelles, professionnelles, et donc les effets sur notre capacité à exécuter l'ensemble des projets liés à la REDD+. Cela s'est fait ressentir. Un confinement, je n'ai rien à apprendre à personne, des mesures barrières, des restrictions de toutes sortes qui n'ont pas toujours permis de nous mettre ensemble pour évoluer dans ce domaine. Il nous a fallu nous adapter à de nouvelles méthodes de travail, telles que le travail à distance, et cela n'a pas permis une progression aussi rapide qu'on le souhaitait. Sur les quelques synergies entre la REDD+, et d'autres processus, alors, plusieurs parties prenantes sont appelées à participer à l'atteinte des objectifs de la REDD+, de façon plus directe, ou même indirecte parfois. Nous avons les administrations publiques qui sont en charge des questions de foresterie, d'autres organisations publiques et privées compétentes sur des questions de cartographie, les organes de gestion de l'administration du territoire, les communautés locales, les populations vulnérables, les gouvernements locaux, mairies, préfectures, les structures de collecte de données forestières, les opérateurs forestiers eux-mêmes, la société civile à travers les organisations non gouvernementales, environnementales notamment. De façon spécifique, les agences responsables de la mise en œuvre des dispositions ou des actions REDD+, sont chargées de collecter des informations sur les sauvegardes et dans le cadre de leur responsabilité en cette matière, dans cette matière et de surveillance de leurs activités notamment. Alors on a un certain nombre
David,
de...
Oui. Une minute s'il vous plaît.
Une minute? Oui, alors 30 secondes simplement, et j'étais quasiment au terme de mon propos pour parler du rôle du Conseil climat dans ce domaine. Le rôle du Conseil climat est de partager le rapport après l'intervention des diverses parties prenantes, partager le rapport avec la Convention notamment, tandis qu'on a une équipe qui est chargée de la gestion des sauvegardes et de l'informatique. Donc, nous allons maintenir, nos efforts, une cohérence avec un niveau de référence des forêts, avec la préservation des classes notamment. Voilà. Et on a dans ce cadre l'appui d'un certain nombre d'organisations. Nous vous en remercions.
Merci. Thank you very much for sharing Gabon's processes, even dating back to before REDD+. And I apologize for not being able to provide translation here. I hope it was possible to follow somehow. We tried, but it was not in possibility. Next, I would like to hear from Indonesia, which has also been a major actor from the very beginning of REDD+. Mr. Siaiful Anwar is Senior Policy Analyst in the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. The floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Dirk. Thank you for this opportunity to share experiences regarding the implementation of REDD+ in Indonesia. Good afternoon, distinguished colleagues and friends. I would like to the point that at least there are several important points in the implementation of REDD+ in Indonesia. First is strong commitment of the to REDD+. This commitment was realized through the issuance of supportive policy, framework, and regulation. Indonesia REDD+ concept is a national approach with possible implementation at the subnational or jurisdictional level. The second important key milestone is various effort to enhance sustainable forest management practices, conservation, carbon stock improvement through degraded forests and land rehabilitation, and more. And additionally, there was an essential key factor, namely international funding support, of course. Support for both during the readiness phase and the implementation phase, which make REDD+ implementation possible. Another crucial factor is the involvement of stakeholders and local communities, of course. This involvement was carried out through the participatory approach in the management of forest or a REDD+ implementation. And the role of technological development was also very, very important. The use of technology in national forest monitoring systems, such as satellite monitoring, to track changes in the forest cover and also forest fire. This is very, very crucial tools. Of course, there are challenges in the implementation of REDD+ in our country. The most challenging aspect is the issue of land ownership and coordination among institutions. Given the various entities with interests related to land, such as plantation, agriculture, and also mining activities and other. The challenges is addressed with several ways. For land ownership issues, challenge was addressed by enhancing effort to legalize community access right, the empowering local communities through education and training to increase their participation in forest management. The government has implemented social forest policy, granting access to communities to participate in managing state-owned forests. Meanwhile, for coordination issues was addressed by ensuring consistency between national and jurisdictional level of implementation. In supporting coordination was addressed by assessing safeguard implementation in the national level. Lastly, I want to share the fact that implementation of REDD+ has enhanced synergy with several programs. The most evidence is the contribution to SDGs. REDD+ implementation has proven to contribute to SDGs goals 13 and 15. Additionally, REDD+ implementation has driven the development of robust MRV systems, crucial not only for REDD+, but also for reporting GHG emission overall, with a focus on improved reporting quality. REDD+ implementation has also fostered policy and planning integration. It has synergized national and regional strategies to reduce emission and adapt to climate change. I think that's it from me. I thank you. Okay.
Thank you very much. There was a rich sharing of points, including stakeholders again, the importance of technology, and many others. So thank you for that. Next we hear from Suriname. Ms. Consuela Paloeng is a forest carbon and reporting specialist at the SBB in Suriname. Welcome.
Yes, thank you, Derek. Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you for including Suriname to take part of this panel discussion. We are honored to share our story because for us, for Suriname, it took almost 15 years to build capacity on a national scale to be able to implement the REDD+ program. So starting from scratch and having no national forest monitoring system in place, we have built capacity in order to set up a national forest monitoring system, which includes several components, such as a satellite land monitoring system where data is being gathered related to the changes in forest cover. One of the components is also a tracking system, which tracks the logging activities in Suriname. And also, we include a component of community-based monitoring, as we believe that the locals are those who are in the field and knows what's happening at that moment. So, yes, there's a brief items or information related to Suriname on the slide. But coming back to the key milestones, the next slide, please. we have achieved as so far as mentioned is the National Forest Monitoring System, which has been established in the readiness phase of REDD+, which is also function as a measurement, reporting, and verification system for the forest sector. So with all information gathered within this system, we were able to submit 2 forest reference emission level for Suriname. And recently, we have submitted the REDD+ results, the REDD+ technical annex, together with our first BUR, making it able for Suriname to have the REDD+ results on the information hub of UNFCCC. So that we did not do by ourselves. We did build capacity on national scale, but we did get support from regional and also international organizations. So for that, we are very thankful. And of course, we, as Dirk says, we are improving over time, learning by doing, and by having this support from different organizations, we are able to improve our data set related to REDD+. For the REDD+ results we have published, these are based on the 2 REDD activities, that is deforestation and forest degradation. But we are now in the process of developing our 3rd forest reference emission level, which will include also conservation, carbon enhancement, and sustainable forest management. And therefore, we get support from the Coalition for Reforestation, and also we like to be set a thank you for them for supporting us in this process. So of course, we also have challenges in our process. One of the challenges is the financial and technology resources, as we believe that it's important to not only have capacity on one specific sector, but all cross-cutting sector needs to build capacity. Therefore, we would like to have a national capacity program being implemented, and we hope to get also for this process support in order to implement that program. One of the other challenges is the change of policy insights at the implementation stage. And we believe by having that capacity built, we could support, advise policymakers to make the best decision for Suriname. So that's the main focus, to have more capacity in order to advise policy making people to make the right decisions. Some synergy we have seen is that with the capacity built on REDD+ and also the information gathered related to the REDD+ results, we have used this information also to support other reporting purposes, such as reporting to the FAO related to forest resource assessment, but also for the greenhouse gas inventory. Another synergy is the linkage we made with the data, which can be used also to identify or to be used as input for the Sustainable Development Goals indicators. And of course, all data is used to support national policy and to be able to have, how do you say that, to have a national goal as it comes to implementing a REDD+ program. So all the efforts that has been done so far, unfortunately, as Peru mentioned, we did not receive the result-based payment yet, but we would like to also add that as a milestone, which we would like to achieve in a short period, to receive those financial payments for the efforts that has been done throughout the 10-15 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Consuela. And we have one more speaker on this panel from Togo, Mr. Bakabima Ditorge Bakena. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good evening, all. At the start of my speech, I would like to thank all the partners, the financial partners who support Togo in the preparation of REDD+. I would like also to thank the organizer of this panel who allowed us to share the lesson in preparation of REDD+. I will continue in French. Next slide. Pour dire l'historique de la REDD+ au Togo, c'est qu'en 2008, nous avons eu une réunion de préparation qui annonçait la question de la REDD+. Et déjà en 2011, on a eu l'apport de l'OIBT qui, à travers un programme, nous a aidé à développer la question de RPP. Et là, c'était avec également l'appui de la coopération suisse. Et en 2012-2013, le groupe de travail a travaillé pour vraiment étoffer le RPP. Et en 2014, le FCPF a reçu notre RPP, il l'a validé, et là, on a eu 3,8 millions pour mettre en œuvre la préparation. Donc, de 2015 à 2020, nous avons conduit tout le processus et on a eu tous les documents nécessaires, que ce soit les sauvegardes, que ce soit la stratégie nationale REDD+, le niveau de mission de référence et le système national de surveillance des forêts, tout a été mis en place. Et on a bouclé ça par le Air Package qui a été accepté au fond au FCPF. Slide. Donc, avec tout ce processus, qu'est-ce qu'on retient comme point clé pour la réussite de la préparation à la REDD+? C'est qu'il faut dire qu'il faut vraiment l'implication vraiment du gouvernement. Le gouvernement s'est impliqué dans toutes les étapes, surtout en mettant en place tous les organes nécessaires pour la conduite, soit de la préparation ou de la REDD+. Il faut dire également l'inclusion et la participation de toutes les parties prenantes. Et on note spécialement chez nous l'activation et l'engouement des femmes qui se sont organisées en ce qu'on appelait consortium femmes REDD+. Et l'autre point qui est nécessaire pour qu'on a pu noter comme point clé, c'est d'apprendre en faisant. C'est-à-dire qu'on a eu beaucoup de renforcement des capacités et ça a permis à ce que les acteurs soient au centre de toutes les activités qu'on a menées lors de la préparation. Ça a conduit à ce que, le premier inventaire, on a fait ensemble avec la GZ, mais le deuxième inventaire, ce sont les Togolais eux-mêmes qui ont conduit leur inventaire. Pour ce point. Donc, next slide. Donc, de tous ces aspects, il faut dire qu'il y a eu beaucoup de points de difficulté dans la préparation à la REDD+. Bien sûr qu'il fallait, par rapport à la société civile, qui n'est pas toujours organisée, il a fallu qu'on fasse plusieurs ateliers, des réunions de concertation pour qu'on puisse les organiser. On a premièrement organisé la société civile en Conseil national des organisations de la société civile pour le développement durable et aussi pour les femmes. Donc, c'était des différents points qui sapaient un peu l'organisation de la préparation. Il y a la question de concertation ou de coordination entre les différents secteurs. Il y a plusieurs secteurs, que ce soit l'énergie, l'agriculture, l'urbanisation. Tous ces secteurs travaillent en vase clos. Ça fait que c'est difficile de les organiser. Mais néanmoins, on a organisé des ateliers pour les mettre en groupes thématiques qui permettent de travailler et en concertation. Il y a également l'absence d'un cadre permanent de dialogue au niveau national. Donc, ce cadre de dialogue au niveau national ne permettait pas qu'on puisse prendre des décisions, mais on a passé par des cadres au niveau local. Donc on est passé par le niveau local où on a mis en place les commissions préfectorales de développement durable qui échangeaient pour donner des orientations sur comment est-ce qu'on pouvait préparer la REDD+. Next slide. Donc, dans la préparation, on a eu pas mal de synergies, et surtout à travers les partenaires et à travers même les différents programmes. La synergie a commencé lorsqu'on élaborait le RPP. Là, comme je le disais tantôt, l'OIBT a fait son apport. La Suisse également a aidé à élaborer le RPP. Et en même temps, le PNUD également a accompagné dans l'organisation et la préparation du RPP. Il y a la synergie dans la mise en œuvre même du RPP. Là, le financement étant reçu du Fonds de partenariat pour le carbone forestier, qui a mis 2 fois l'appui et qui était à l'ordre de 6 millions de dollars. Et il y a eu aussi synergie avec UNONG, la PARJA, qui a eu son 0,7 millions de dollars. Il y a également le financement de la coopération allemande à travers le GZ, qui, à travers son programme de REDDness pour la réhabilitation des forêts, a accompagné également le processus en accompagnant dans l'élaboration de l'inventaire forestier national. Nous avons également les renforcements des capacités à travers le programme ONU-REDD, qui a spécialement conduit renforcé beaucoup de capacités dans le système de MRV. Il y a également la synergie dans les programmes et projets. On a le projet...
Finish in 1 minute, please.
OK, thank you. Il y a le programme de PGICT qui a également appuyé le processus. Il y a également le projet PAL-CC de l'Union européenne qui également a contribué à mettre en place le processus. Et enfin, le gouvernement, à travers les salaires et également l'Office de développement et d'exploitation des forêts qui abritait la coordination nationale REDD+. Voilà un peu ce qu'on a par rapport à la stratégie. Mais la question qui se pose maintenant, et alors, on fait quoi? Parce que depuis 2020, on a fini le processus, rien. Donc actuellement, les plaidoyers et les sollicitations qu'on cherche, c'est des appuis pour mettre en œuvre notre stratégie nationale REDD+. Merci.
Thank you very much. We have time for 2, maybe 3 questions to the panel. Let's see. I hear a lot of commonalities between the experiences of the different countries. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Merci pour les présentations. Moi, je suis Madame Molo et Nathalie. Je suis de la coordination nationale des projets REDD+ au Cameroun. J'ai une question pour Monsieur du Togo, parce qu'il a parlé du consortium femmes REDD+. Donc, j'aimerais savoir qu'est-ce que c'est et quel est son rôle. Et donc, c'était ça ma question. Merci.
Thank you very much. First, to congratulate the UNFCCC secretariat for proactively addressing the issue of individual companies taking up the name of REDD+ and try to promote activities with the same name, creating confusion at the national level. I would like to know what countries are doing in terms of addressing those news reports on the worthless values of REDD+ credits created by projects. Thanks.
Sorry, can you briefly say your name?
Yeah, Emilio Sempris, Honduras delegation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll take one more.
Thank you. Thanks to the panelists. I have a question for our representative from Peru. I don't remember which COP anymore, but I've been involved in REDD+ since 2008. And I remember in one of the COPs, We saw, indigenous communities and NGOs saying forests are not commodities. And now I'm excited to hear you saying, yep, indigenous people, REDD+, working with REDD+, and appear to be successful, I assume. Can you share maybe the success factors? Because we know indigenous communities been working with NRM, natural resource management, for many, many years. But what's that distinguish REDD+ as success in the view of the indigenous communities? Thank you.
I think we have to keep it at 3 questions. Sorry. Let's answer
Merci
first.
beaucoup. Je suis Kamfti Ditouatou du Togo et c'est mon collègue qui vient de présenter. Il a relevé les défis maintenant pour la mise en œuvre de la stratégie REDD+ du Togo. Je voudrais juste voir si quelques pays peuvent juste présenter brièvement leur expérience en matière de mise en œuvre du processus REDD+, pour que nous puissions nous en inspirer. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you for that. I think we had 2 specific questions and 2 open questions. So I would go once through the panel and see who has something specific to answer. Maybe first to the question from Cameroon.
Merci. Merci pour la question. En fait, la CF REDD+, consortium Femmes REDD+, comme je le disais tantôt, il y a plusieurs organisations de femmes au Togo. Donc, on ne pouvait pas travailler individuellement avec ces organisations de femmes. Donc, elles se sont, après plusieurs réunions de concertation, mises ensemble pour créer ce qu'on appelle CF-REDD. Et CF-REDD, c'est la branche active au Togo qui travaille dans le sens de la REDD+. Donc, ces femmes sont au sein de la CF-REDD+, font les différentes activités en lien avec la REDD+. Voilà, juste ce que... Merci.
Milagros, you also had a question.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the question. And I think every country has a different approach to REDD+, but the idea is that the national level is the one that leads the process. I think that's the main idea, and I'm happy to see more colleagues from familiar faces coming to the room. So I think that that's one of the main ideas, that it's at the national level that we have this process, and that the process is linked to what we're doing on the ground with different organizations. In the case of Peru, indigenous peoples have had a very strong voice. They are very interested in the process, because what is the main issue? That what we need to reduce deforestation is that we need support on the ground. That the funding, whenever it comes, or it will support, and also because we have to work with public funds as well. I mean, it's a diversity of funds that we have to work. Obviously, results-based payments are also going to support us, but these come at the end. So sometimes, and this is one of the main ideas, that we need also funds before, because we're not going to reduce deforestation just because we're all agreed to reduce deforestation. There needs to be support to those that are living in the forefront of deforestation, or those communities that are working on avoiding or that have their forests already there, but that historically there hasn't been deforestation, but they need funds or they need support to avoid those pressures and those drivers of deforestation that are coming more each time. In Peru, historically, we haven't had deforestation that much. So that is one of our main challenges. How do we distribute funds, or how do we support those that are on the ground and that are really stewards of forests? So definitely that is part of what we're discussing with indigenous peoples. They have been very proactive, and that's very important for us because they have made very clear their statement and what they want on this process. And that's part of the work that we're doing to engage them, to support them, to disseminate information, and also to have safeguards in place and that is part of our REDD Plus safeguard. And actually, before coming to the COP, we approved our grievance mechanism that is now institutionalized and that has been part of the REDD Plus process as well. Thank you very much.
Consuela, you want to answer the question on the REDD Plus?
Yes, I think I understood the question. The question was, what are countries doing with the results? Was that the question? Emilio? What was that the question? For Suriname, so now the REDD Plus, it's about 18 million ton of carbon dioxide that has been achieved and is published on the Information Hub. So as the negotiation is ongoing here at COP related to 6.2, the cooperation approach, we have for that, for 2021, kind of the utmost there. So yes, as Peru said, it doesn't matter from where the funding comes, at least we get the result-based payment for the efforts that we have been doing for almost 10 years. So I hope with that I answered your question. But to add on the community part, how community being engaged in the REDD Plus program for Suriname, it's now more at the capacity building level, like including communities, having the capacity in more sustainable, how to implement sustainable forest management, and able to reduce emission coming from logging activities. So that's how we are trying to deal with engaging community in the REDD Plus program. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anyone like to add? Yapul, you want to add something?
Well, thank you. Please accept my apology. I didn't got fully the question, but is it about the what we do now, or what we use the result of REDD Plus? Which one? If what we do with the result, I think, well, first we have a benefit sharing mechanism. So the result, there is mechanism how to distribute the result in the monetary aspect. And also now, for example, from Norway, now we have a program for a follow net sink 2030. So we have a target in 2030. There will be more sink than emission. So we have target 140 million ton of CO2 equivalent sink. I think that's I hope I answered your question. Thank you.
Thank you. Davi, you want to add something?
Non, pas particulièrement. Dans le cadre de la mise en œuvre de notre stratégie, il y a eu l'association des diverses parties prenantes, comme je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, donc pas d'autres éléments particuliers à évoquer. Merci.
Thank you. Let's thanks the first panel. We have to switch quickly to the other one. But give a big applause to the effort of our customers. Well, there's a small exercise going on changing the panels. As you all know, one of the core elements of REDD Plus is international collaboration. To make it work, we have to work together. I'm very excited to have a few experts here representing countries and organizations that have prioritized this cooperation with forest countries over the past decade and a half. And I would like to invite them to come up to the panel. I think now, 10 years into the REDD Plus framework, is the moment to also deep dive into this experience, explore lessons learned on collaboration and on the importance of transparency of REDD Plus actions. And to halt and reverse deforestation by 2030, we will need to make good use of this knowledge in the next 2 years, creating realistic but ambitious plans to move us forward. Again, we need to keep the initial reflections to 4 to 5 minutes and leave some time for questions at the end. And I would like you to invite to hear first from Maggie Charnley, head of the International Forest Unit in the UK. Maggie, over to you.
There we go. Do I need to turn this on, or will it go straight on? Okay, super. Nice to see you all. I never like to criticise Dirk, but I looked at the title of this, and I feel like REDD Plus expert might be slightly overselling me. And I look at the previous panellists, and I think this is where the real REDD Plus expertise is. It's the people who work in the forest countries who've been implementing plans and programmes over the last decade or more to really change the way that forests in their countries are managed. And honestly, I really don't know where I would start. So massive congratulations to all of the countries that have spoken before us, and I would just slightly object to the experts. But the UK, and my predecessors before me, I can't claim to have been in this field for as long as most of the people in this room, but the UK has long been a supporter of the REDD Plus process and the Article 5, and we've worked very closely with forest countries and other stakeholders to make sure that we have this massively important issue captured in the heart of the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement. But as I said at the start, we know the real work is in the implementation, and that is a challenge where forest countries, and tropical forest countries in particular, really carry the responsibility. But it's not a responsibility they can bear alone. And that's where, I guess, the UK plays a role. We can ensure that we provide finance, we can work with other countries to ensure information flows on how to do this well, learning from the countries who've taken the biggest steps and making sure that information flows. Ensuring that we have the technology to support forest monitoring. And I'd be showing my age a bit if I said that when I did my degree, global information systems were just taking advantage of the satellites that were released from the Cold War and the end of the Cold War. But the leaps and bounds we've made in terms of the technology and to support monitoring in particular is hard to imagine over such a short space of time. We've worked with forest countries to understand their priorities because that's where the real expertise sits. And we've worked with the other donor countries and the partners on this panel to identify and ensure we increase financing flows for countries participating in REDD Plus through all three of its phases: readiness, implementation, and results-based finance. And I hear from the panel the disappointment that the larger results-based finance hasn't flowed. And I hope we can work together to ensure that there are new sources of results-based finance going forwards. We've long been participating in the World Bank programs in this space, including FCPF and ISFL, where we are now seeing results-based finance flowing, albeit after many years of work. But I think one of the really exciting things we're seeing from FCPF in particular is that it's really paving the way for a new form of results-based finance that takes advantage of the much deeper pockets of the private sector. And one of the things I've found most exciting about this COP has been really seeing the LEAF coalition, which we established together with Norway and the US, coming into its own. So for me in particular, a moment that we shared with Ghana and Costa Rica, the first recipients of results-based finance through the LEAF coalition, which included money from big corporate contributors who want to help us ensure a long-term future for tropical forests and, importantly, for the communities that depend on them. More recently, the UK has also been increasing its contributions aimed at building in-country capacity in a more targeted manner, so listening to what countries have told us they need, where the gaps in capacity are, and learning from our experiences with LEAF to ensure that that capacity is built to take advantage of carbon markets as they emerge. For example, we've just announced £24.5 million for an Aim for Forest programme launched in 2023 in partnership with the FAO. And that aims to enable participation in REDD Plus and, again, the emerging carbon finance opportunities, while also strengthening a FOLU contribution to NDCs. And that joined-up approach to the advantages in country was laid out way better by the panellists in the previous session than I can do here. but it will support that funding will support 20 countries with institutionalised national forest monitoring systems that will inform domestic policy and decision making and provide high integrity MRV through the most modern monitoring technologies, but also in learning what has worked and rolling that through. REDD Plus has benefits sharing built into the heart of it, and this helps to differentiate it from other sectors. We've seen through programs like REDD Early Movers that when we focus on governance and community benefits, there can be a lasting legacy in countries in terms of securing a place for indigenous and traditional community voices in determining how plans are made and how money is invested. But we all need to do more to make sure that that is at the heart of REDD Plus as we go forwards. In Glasgow, when UK was the COP26 president, and goodness, that feels like a long time ago, we sought to put forests at the forefront of efforts to tackle climate change. And I have been really heartened to feel that flowing through from COP26 to COP28, as when you can hear forests tripping off the tongues of all sorts of people in all sorts of unexpected spaces. I don't need to tell this audience here, but it's always good to make the point. Forests are vital for global mitigation efforts, which is in part why it's been possible to pull the global community in to support them. But I think we need to be better at telling the story of why forests matter to local and regional actors too. They're vital for food production, and we know they're vital for livelihoods and for the people around them. They're also vital for water flows, both preventing too much and ensuring there is enough during time of drought. Half of Africa's rainfall is dependent on the forests of Central Africa, and we are not yet, I think, using those stories well enough to ensure that as climate finance flows, there's a recognition not just of the mitigation benefits that we see taken advantage of in carbon markets, but also of the resilience and the adaptation benefits, the necessary investments in forests to keep food security going as we make our way through the 21st century. So, mindful of time, 3 things that I think we need to consider as we go forwards to meet our shared goal of halting and reversing forest loss by 2030 while delivering sustainable development and a just land transition. Firstly, we need to maintain and increase the political visibility of forests, and I think that is in part by continuing to make that case. The evidence continues to support more and more the centrality of forests within the climate ambition. The UK helped to establish the Forest and Climate Leaders Partnership to drive ambition around forests, and I think one of the things that I'm most proud of in that space is that we're seeing genuine discussions between the global south countries and the global north countries that really that brings us together to genuinely listen to each other, to hear where the problems are and to act in partnership. Not a negotiation, but a real partnership where we come together and just try and make the best of a very complicated situation. Secondly, we need to continue to increase financing flows for forests and strengthen capacity for their effective protection and management. That includes hearing the call for results-based finance as part of the agreement we reached in Article 5 of the UNFCCC, but recognising that ODA will never be enough and that we need to tap into the responsibilities that need to be taken by corporates and companies. And we are definitely seeing them step forwards. So making sure there are systems in place that enable finance to flow, ideally in a much less bureaucratic way, will be a real challenge for all of us. Investments in REDD Plus are laying the foundations for forest countries to continue raising ambitions on forests and to start participating in carbon markets. But we need to make sure that the international rules that are being developed in other rooms in this very venue will work for forest countries, and that they don't insist on starting again, but build on the foundations of REDD Plus, on the many years of work that countries in this room have put into establishing those systems. And finally, we need to work with our supply chains and in partnership with business, academia, civil society, and with other governments to build the incentives for delivering in a sustainable way that supports and incentivises the kind of changes we've already heard about in this session. Coming from a country like the UK that depends on imports for much of our food, the UK has a big footprint overseas. We're taking steps to address this directly, including through legislating large companies to ensure that products sold in the UK have not been responsible for illegal deforestation in their country of origin. But it's through the support for REDD+, through the capacity building, through the results-based finance, that we can have the biggest contribution, I think, for forest countries. And I'm very proud to be part of that story. I look forward to the next decade of REDD+ and to seeing where it takes us.
Thank you, Maggie. And let me assure you that the term experts is not trademarked in any way. Next, we would like to hear also from the FCPF. Mr. Evan Denise is the practice manager of the Climate Finance Mobilization Management unit in the World Bank. So welcome, Evan. We look forward to hear from you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dirk. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to join Maggie in the congratulations to the previous panel and the panelists who really spoke on behalf of the different REDD+ countries for the huge progress since for the anniversary of the Warsaw Framework on REDD+. So I'll speak on behalf of the World Bank as a trustee of basically different multi-donor trust funds that have aimed to support countries in their journey and in getting ready for results-based climate finance and for carbon markets. The main one that has been discussed is the Forest Carbon Partnership Facility, but we also have the Integrated Sustainable Forest Landscape, Biocarbon, ISFL, among others. And it's really been a fantastic journey and to hear it here today in terms of the different steps that have been involved here, going from the design of the emission reduction programs, the jurisdictional REDD+ programs, the generation of high-quality emission reductions and the capacity built in terms of monitoring, reporting, and verification and registries, but also in terms of negotiating emission reduction payment agreements and the whole decisions on what to do next with carbon credits used against the country's NDCs or making them available to carbon markets. And then very much commented making sure that the climate finance flows to communities through the benefit sharing plans as one of the mechanisms of social inclusion. So I think, and coming back to the term of the expertise, I think it has been a lot of learning by doing through these basically last 15 years. There is three messages that I would like to convey, both looking back, looking at where we are now, and a little bit going forward. First of all, looking back, I think from the Forest Carbon Partnership Facility, there's been a huge capacity built among the 47 countries that the FCPF has supported. As Maggie was saying, I think it's also been the creation of this network of collaboration between multilaterals, countries, academia, civil society, indigenous peoples and local communities and women's groups. I think what has been key in this is the whole governance system and the way these different, for example, indigenous peoples and local communities have been included as observers in the Forest Carbon Partnership Facility. Then there is the point about transparency, the transparency in the whole process, not only in the availability of studies and reports, but the whole setting of standards, crediting methodology, the MRV process, and the whole flow of finance through the benefit sharing plans. I think we've also learned in this process the importance of the non-carbon benefits, the importance of land rights, biodiversity, and in the previous panel, I think also the challenges in particular for highly forested, low deforestation countries like Suriname, our counterpart from Peru, but also Bhutan, Guyana, among others. I think now we're at a very critical stage in the Forest Carbon Partnership Facility in the sense that several countries have received the first payments, countries like Mozambique, Ghana, last week Madagascar, but also Costa Rica and Indonesia. So it's at a very critical stage where these countries have shown their capacity to generate high quality, high integrity emission reduction credits and to be rewarded for them. What is also exciting is that several of these countries are expected to generate additional countries in addition to what the Forest Carbon Partnership Facility will pay in terms of results-based climate finance, and go through this decision-making of potentially making them available to carbon markets. And we expect by end of 2024 about 24 million high-quality credits to be made available to carbon markets with a total of 126 million over the next 3 to 5 years. Similarly, we're very glad to see how the progress on the LEAF coalition and how Ghana and Costa Rica have signed, and this is really something to celebrate, and I think there needs to be more of those. And that brings me to the next and my last point, Dirk, on basically looking forward. What do we see as important going forward? I think, firstly, making sure that all the countries involved in the Forest Carbon Partnership Facility are getting to that same stage and receive payments, follow the implementation of the benefit sharing plan. Secondly, support the countries that have benefited from the readiness, the 32 who have not basically signed emission reduction payments agreements under the FCPF. Thirdly, making carbon markets work and have a common narrative on high integrity, high quality carbon credits. The World Bank in this COP has basically communicated its roadmap on carbon market engagement, and that is an important dimension of it, is to have more countries, larger jurisdictions, more sectors basically in this space. And we have a new multi-donor partnership, which is called SCALE, Scaling Climate Action by Lowering Emissions, associated with ENABLE, which is enhancing access to benefits while lowering emissions, targeted in particular for indigenous peoples and local communities. I totally agree what other panelists have said about the importance of bringing more innovative financing instruments, including several types of emission reduction or conservation-linked bonds. And finally, from the World Bank, we are also, with our development partners and country partners, moving towards one global challenge program on forest, which will really bring together the whole set of instruments from the World Bank group, including the results-based mechanisms. So with that, I think sending a very clear joint signal of support to the REDD+ countries will be key going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Erwin. Next we turn to Øyvind Dahl, Policy Director of Norway's International Climate and Forest Initiative. You have the floor.
Thank you. Sound okay there? I had a bit of a challenge justifying me flying to Dubai to this climate COP to celebrate the framework when I talked to my daughter just before leaving here. So I think I'm going to start with congratulating the previous panel for the reason for celebrating would be the achievements and happening then in the countries. And to start with, I can also confirm, like Meg and Erwin, not necessarily the biggest expert on the Warsaw Framework, but have learned a lot through working with partners and forest countries and governments over the last decade on how implementation actually is taking place on the ground, which is different from country to country. And maybe distant from the slides that we got the presentation for, starting with introduction to the framework as such, I had to then come up with some examples to my daughter, very live examples of what we are really celebrating. And I dug up the following then, that during the process then of the framework implementation, Liberia has revised its Land Act, allowing for a clear definition of responsibilities of governance of all their land. So they have removed all the clarity in the landscape as such through their legal framework. That is one example of something that is tangible. Indonesia, who over the last years have impressed all of us with drastically reducing forest loss to impressive levels right now, also continuing through their ambition and confirming that they're going to continue doing that. Last night just announced also that they're internalizing the measures for achieving this through including in their formula for cash distribution to local governments. And for those of you who don't work in government, this is the bread and butter of government. The cash distribution to local governments and to local government institutions that comes annually based on your demographic or your geographic challenges. Forest cover is now being included, and this, of course, is a full internalization of what maybe started out as a REDD+ strategy way back at the beginning of this process. Ethiopia has been, I've been a long-standing fan of Ethiopia ever since living there, and they show the way already in the Durban COP. They had an event just a couple of days ago where they celebrated this journey going from one COP to another with a decade in between, where they already back then set out the pathway for how they're going to achieve inclusive growth, social justice, and economic growth through a green pathway. And they have stuck then loyal to that pathway ever since. And of course, the structure that we're discussing here today has helped Ethiopia do this in a structured way. It's comparable to other countries, but it's stepwise and it's gradual, but the direction has sort of never, they have never diverted from that. They also established a national funding instrument that we've seen some countries have chosen to do, Indonesia another, that gradually we get confidence in those institutions and those mechanisms' ability to deliver on their commitment. So those are examples that I had to sort of put to my daughter to justify the trip over here. But let me just then go into the donor role then and talk a little bit about what has been made it possible for Norway to stay on as a long-term and sort of at scale supporter of this process. And the Warsaw Framework has been absolutely instrumental to that. So all kudos to those who negotiated it and agreed upon it, and all of those who have used it now, all of you have used it in national implementation and through partnerships and support beyond, because it has lent a lot of credibility to REDD+ as a tool. And this is something that we should usually celebrate, all of us, today. It has been possible to justify to our own voters and our own taxpayers that there is integrity in the system. And that credibility allows for further investments and further collaboration. It has set down the rules for participation and ensure that indigenous peoples and local communities and all levels of governance and the government system, the democracy in each country has been taken on board. So everybody who has been touched by this and who is concerned by what's happening in the REDD+ arena has, there are rules and requirements for how that engagement should happen. It has set out the rules for documentation so you can compare both historically and geographically what's going on in the landscape. That has been a huge opportunity to demonstrate transparency and accountability to all those involved. That has been absolutely fundamental. And then, of course, back to government, as it sort of is my little pet issue. Governments, and as we heard from the representatives here before, has set down the rules for how they're going to do it. And they have made national rules for implementation through policies, through institutions, and through due process. And that has also been sort of a huge step forward in terms of ensuring legality, inclusiveness and empowerment. It's been comparable, so each sections of a country can see what's going on. And it has built capacity to addressing the drivers in a very convincing manner. So from our perspective then, in terms of what is next, continuing building on what is already been achieved, and Maggie did that very thoroughly, so I'm not going to repeat that, but I'm going to maybe touch a little bit about what our ambition would be for the next few years ahead. We have then committed to continue our work and our support through this decade. So Norway will continue to provide and offer support mainly through results-based payment up to 2030. So they will continue providing that. Of course, then increasingly in collaboration with other funding tools that is being developed through different platforms, and both Article 5 and Article 6 is important in that matter. We're going to continue to develop further framework for transactional high integrity credits, building on the framework, but taking it, of course, a step further, simply because the Paris Agreement encourages all of us to do that, to aim higher and to move faster. And then, of course, considering offering additional investments in transparency tools, innovation and technology like satellite monitoring. We, during this COP, has offered then another 4-year period of free high-resolution satellite data to be provided to countries that use it in the national forest monitoring systems, both for monitoring and verification. And we believe that's going to be important. We're going to continue working in partnerships with everyone that is on this table and more. But also to encourage countries to work more integrated and to seek the synergies across sectors in terms of land use planning and land use management. So that's sort of be our contribution, and then of course we're open for business and discussions on how we're going to work with you on all these issues. I'm going to leave this with a few challenges that try to look a little bit into the future as well. And some of these challenges we're facing on an everyday basis and in to different degrees in different geographies. But we clearly have still a risk of losing out on credit integrity, right? And this is something that is definitely not in the interest of REDD+ countries. So the integrity in the credits is absolutely crucial. There is a risk of reversal because of policy shifts and others. We need to, stay very alert on that. There is a risk of consumer fatigue in our countries back home due to lack of progress or lack of innovation. They expect, things to be better as we move along, to continue offering support and to offer, going into the shop and selecting goods that they are confident in has mildest possible environmental footprint. There is a risk of stakeholder fatigue in the countries that we work and where the action is actually happening, right? Expectations, waiting for benefits, waiting for improvements in their own everyday lives. That might be the biggest risk that we're facing as we try to speed up. And then, of course, we always have the ever-present the risk of ecological fatigue, a natural pressure or collapse in some circumstances, which we also need to be aware. All this in sum means that we probably would need to work harder and stronger to continue working on the Warsaw Framework. Thanks.
Thank you, Øyvind. And we now hear from Amy Duchel, Senior Forestry Officer at the FAO.
Thank you, Dirk, for convening this panel. And I'm here on behalf of the FAO's Forestry Director, Wu Ximin, as well as the REDD+ team at FAO. It's a pleasure to be here with my fellow panelists and many friends in the audience. And I think it is important. This is an important moment to reflect how far we've come. I mean, it is still amazing to me that, starting 15 plus years ago, the international forest community came together, negotiated REDD+, came through with the Warsaw Framework that was later enshrined in Article 5. I mean, it still shocks me that all this happened, and we see that when we're looking at other sectors who are struggling with how to be recognized in the context of the Paris Agreement. So it's a moment to really value that and understand how important that is for recognizing the importance for climate action. FAO's support for REDD+ has largely been in the context of the UN REDD program, the flagship program, and that with our dear partners at UNDP and UNEP, and that it's 15 years of anniversary this COP as well, so that's also something to celebrate. Our support has really been along two main lines. I mean, one has been in this really bolstering national forest monitoring capacities. And I think we can all agree that that's been a major intermediate milestone of the REDD+ process. Dirk, many of those submissions, the 60 countries, the forest reference emission levels, as well as the REDD+ results, a lot of that has been, we've been directly involved, FAO and through the UN REDD program to support, I think, 75% of those submissions. So it's really has been to support countries in getting there. The other is, Dirk, you mentioned transparency, and that's been a huge capacity building program at FAO through the CIBIT Forest, boosting transparency of forest data through the JEF. And then finally, Maggie mentioned Aim for Forests, and I think this is taking all of that know-how the next step further. And I also want to mention very specifically a component of that program that's focused on Indigenous peoples and bolstering local level and Indigenous peoples' monitoring capacities and involvement in monitoring processes. The second really line of action has been mobilizing climate finance, supporting countries in mobilizing climate finance. And, through REDD+ result-based finance, but also just in general, FAO through the Green Climate Fund has unlocked 1.2 billion USD in climate action finance for projects in developing countries. And those, of course, range from sustainable forest management to the resilience of farming systems, some forest agriculture linkages, and 250 million of that has been for REDD+ in Argentina, Chile, Colombia, Congo, Cote d'Ivoire, DRC, Nepal, a variety of countries. And then, of course, the LEAF initiative, the LEAF coalition is a game changer, and we've also been supporting through UN REDD the proposals to the LEAF coalition for the supply of high-quality emission reductions. But still, the latest FAO Global Forest Resources Assessment shows that, while the rate of forest loss has declined, it's still 10 million hectares annually, and the finance is, dwarfed by the scale of the challenge. And so it's clear that while so much progress has been made, there's still so much to do. And one very important role for FAO and an organization like FAO is to really try to build the synergies between forestry and agriculture. And we see, of course, 90% of deforestation is driven by unsustainable agriculture. Of course, a lot of the regulations coming down the line are trying to decouple sustainable agriculture from deforestation, and this is an important area of support for FAO. But another area of support is understanding the key role of forests in agricultural productivity. And Maggie, I think you articulated that very nicely with the cooling benefits, the water regulatory functions, the biodiversity benefits that indeed directly affect agricultural production and ultimately food security. And so that's really a line of action that we're trying to take next to build those synergies and help identify opportunities to close the finance gap simply by showing and demonstrating the importance of forests for agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amy. I would like to have more time with all of you to address questions and go into details. I was also had planned to have closing remarks, but the realities of the session did not allow the Executive Secretary to come. And I was informed that in about 59 seconds we will lose the microphones. So I can only encourage you to keep up this discussion during the COP. Use the space that you're here. Try to, if you have further questions, try to address them by finding the people here. I think all of them have willingness and ready to share their experience with all of us. And maybe the key message to take home from this event is that REDD+ can work if we work on it together and seriously. So thank you very much for joining us here today. And have a good rest of the COP.
is 30. The other one, critical about my carbon footprint, is 17.
Thank you, that was really nice. That was very nice.